Kriti Kamala Shane Bhajatara Charana Deko Shantamone Premonayani Aparupa Priya Darshana Aparupa Priya Darshana.
Namaste, Babaji.
Namaste, Anurag.
This is our 5th meeting at the Portland ashram, and on our last conversation we had a wonderful talk about the Durga book that you wrote, the 24 Aspects of Mother Durga.
10 articles of Sri Durga.
The 10 divine articles of Sri Durga. And I'd like to, that very same year, about 21 years ago, you wrote a book called The 24 Aspects of Mother Kali. So I thought we could talk about that and get some insights about Mother Kali, who seems to be a very popular goddess these days. In fact, this is your most popular and widely distributed book. What do you account for her reemergence in the culture at this point?
Well, the source and impetus behind her reemergence is Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, this God-realized illumined soul. We call Kali Avatar, actually. 1836 to 1886 was a brief 50 years. And further enforced by Swami Vivekananda, who, to quote him, said, Mother Kali is my especial thing. So he's this monk that has this deep relationship with this Shakta ideal, Shakta Advaita Vada, sometimes we call it, the path of those who, as it were, merge Divine Mother reality with Advaita, non-duality. To us, there's really no merging, they're just naturally one. Mother's there in everything as Shakti power. And then there's only her formless form. Sometimes we talk about her blackness. She's got a formless form too. And I think those two impetuses are there. Swami Vivekananda then had to come in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions and begin speaking the Dharma, and then sort of connect it to Mother reality and Mother wisdom. Vak Devi, the goddess of the word. That's Saraswati, and she's more Vedic, but Kali is more of a tantric goddess. So you have these two rivers of Vedanta and Tantra that coming out of India and hitting the West and hopefully washing clean a lot of these impurities, and also clarifying a lot of doubts and fears. That Divine Mother, as we know her maybe as Mother Mary, and as the Buddhists call her Pragya Paramita, and Tara, Tibet Buddhist calls her Tara. There are forms of Mother in all religions, really. Fatima in Muslim religion. And so this is since she is so hidden, O Mother Supreme in human form, but in modest veil, Lajya Patavriti is the song sings by one of Sri Ramakrishna's apostles. So since she's so hidden, she has to be brought out, and she stays hidden for hundreds of years, maybe longer, and only reemerges and comes out. So here in the West, with that reemergence you're talking about, it's a little bit tinged, let's say, with New Age goddess kind of idea. Goddess as an earth mother. I think even on the back here, if you read it, is Mother just an earth goddess? Is she just a forearm deity in a picture and so forth? No. She's the mother of our very soul. She's one form, one reality in many forms, and can appear there with mercurial speed, and from age to age too. She can reveal herself. Classically in the scriptures of India, when Divine Mother reveals herself, she'll usually do it through Lord Brahma, who is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the creator, they call sometimes, the projector. And before she gets revealed, he's four-faced, Lord Brahma. He's depicted that way. And each of the four Vedas gets sung out of his four mouths. So whenever she's about to make appearance, all of a sudden it's like Lord Brahma is there. Then the Vedas come out. And all the gods and goddesses look, oh, that means Divine Mother's going to be revealed. She's going to come forth. So it's very thrilling. The yogis meditate in mountain caves in deep, dense darkness for years and decades to just get a glimpse of that light of hers. and it's very difficult to claim that vision. So when it reemerges on that level, I say it's like tinged a little bit with nature goddess worship, and in America, I mean, and with the idea of some sort of loosely or surface understood goddess deity, Hindu deity kind of worship that was there even back with the hippies and posters on walls and things. If you see her coming out in this manifestation of Divine Mother called Sri Ramakrishna, and Swami Vivekananda bringing that west to America in 1893, if you want to look at the real history of it, then on top of that is the manifestation of Kali herself as Sri Ramakrishna's divine consort, Sri Sharada Devi.
In the book, you've talked about the forearms of Kali being the forearms of Sharada and Ramakrishna.
That's very nice. Two each. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good depiction. I even forgot I said that. Thanks for reminding me. But with Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna used to worship her and even put her on the altar once, removed all of their artifacts and did actual worship to her in a puja, Shodashi puja, like the eternally 16-year-old virgin, the pure one, and called her a manifestation of Kali, Lakshmi, and Saraswati in one form in this age. And then also said, don't worry, she's like a village cat that rolls in ashes to conceal its true colors so other cats, won't bother it. So he used to humorously refer to her like that, that she really seems like a village woman, but she's a full manifestation of the goddess here. And 6 million people now have found out about that.
I think one of the valuable things about this book is that you show so many aspects of Kali. I think in the depictions that I've seen in modern culture, most people focus on her, the fury and the mayhem that she causes. Something's going on, horrible in their lives. Oh, Kali's, but
at work,
Kali's at work. But you bring out all the different aspects of in the symbology. For instance, there's the Varda Mudra, which bestows well-being, which people don't necessarily associate with Kali. Yes. Yeah. Can you talk about that a bit? That particular mudra, which you examine very ably in the beginning chapter.
Yes. In all images of Mother Kali, you don't necessarily see. She sometimes holds other things, but usually the sword of wisdom and the severed head, which means the ego's been, attenuated there.
Yes.
And it's always smiling. I'd like to say, thank you, Mother, for removing this gross ego and making me your devotee, your child. May the Mother of the Universe my refuge be, Vivekananda says in his poems about her. But the Varda Mudra then is, we were talking about just a couple days ago, whereas giving of all good things meaning things that are good basically for your spiritual life, so she won't have to become wrathful and deal with your ego. Her speciality is killing egos. And probably you could say unripe and ripe egos she'll dispatch, because ripe egos will want transcendence, and so she'll give you formlessness. That's called moksha. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha are the 4 fruits she gives in the Shakta tradition, and basically that's the teachings, dharma, wisdom, then wealth, then a right livelihood, you could call it, like Lord Buddha called it, and then kama, fulfillment of legitimate desires, kama, and then moksha. So moksha at the end, she'll give a ripe ego that people don't long for liberation until actually their consciousness begins to get more refined. Then they long for it. Before then, it's just mumukshutvam. It's just before the mumukshutvam stage means you have a sincere desire to get free. But we just in class today looked at the 12 levels of detachment that takes to get to that kind of sincere desire to be free. So there's a lot that goes on in the interim where she will wage war with you. It's kind of a nice way of talking about her wrathfulness. She's out against egos, demonic forces, and if they're in you, she won't hesitate, if you're sincere about getting rid of them, to help you in various ways. But with the Varda Mudra, you might say, once you are ready to receive, she'll give you these things that are precious, precious fruits of spiritual life, which are different than the fruits of earthly life, and certainly of worldly life. And then with the fearlessness, it's just like, you can't really understand abhayam, true fearlessness, until you've reached that level of qualification where she gives you these things that will, like wisdom, that will allow you to be fearless. So the whole thing is a beautiful rendition of Avasta's stages by which you get into higher and higher consciousness. Vedanta is an underground river, true, and we feel like Vedanta is a practice that all happens mostly in the mind. It's not in the body, like hatha and pranayama and things like that. So there are people who come to the Vedanta and they're high-minded. So if they're high-minded, the Vedanta fits with them so well right away, and they just solve their matters and they're free. They're a living, liberated soul, or an adept practitioner by the time their body is falling. But if Vedanta comes to a person that's not qualified and is ill-prepared for it, it appeals to a lot of people, but they can't follow through with it. So we call it sometimes a finishing school in that regard. But I'm not saying that people who are not prepared shouldn't come to Vedanta, because there's a lot of things you'll hear which are Mother Kali's voice, which will snap you to, and then you'll go work on yourself and come back, and go work on yourself and come back, and keep your torch lit. It gets blown out in the world, but pretty soon you can keep it lit.
Right. Yeah, I've seen the manifestation of the sense of well-being in you. In 21 years that I've been in SRV, we've come across crises every once in a while, and you've always been calm and had faith, and everything's going to work out, and everything does work out. Did this faith develop over a period of time, or do you remember when a shift started happening, where you started having faith in the mother to take care of day-to-day things?
I had that faith since I was very young, but the assurance in that faith became deeper and deeper. I could put it that way. I remember asking my mother when I was just in, preteen, who is God, what is God, where is God? She didn't have an answer for it. So she taught me a simple Christian prayer, and now I lay me down to sleep and all that. But later on I felt like now I lay me down to sleep really is, my teacher put it in a much nicer term later when he said, I have received a command from the Mother of the Universe that death must die. I must put sleep to sleep, and I must put death in its own grave. So in that way, with the growth of any child in this world today, then they will, by stages, understand. But the original faith is there, and it's not blind, it's real in the case of myself, and of course in the case of my superiors, my spiritual teachers, gurus. They even profess that. You read the testaments of people who knew Swami Vivekananda when he was Narendra, and what kind of soul he was. We were talking about Swami Abhedananda last night, whose name was Kali. That was his pre-monastic name, and how he went to Sri Ramakrishna, and as a teenager he would go home and have these profound meditations. He described later, he was just in a world of bliss by just going to this man every once in a while, and his parents were trying to keep him from it. He'd sneak out of his house and walk across the jungles near Calcutta to this temple of Kali and sit and talk with Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and then come back and just at a young age be in these meditations. So these are, souls that have already come back with either a great amount of adeptship, or they're past masters. And they just have to come back to help you. They're not here for any other reason. Krishna says that in the Gita. I'm not here because I need anything. I'm here for loka sangraha, the betterment, the highest good for all beings.
I was recalling this morning that there was a poem that Swami Vivekananda had written, and called Kali the Mother. And I looked it up, and it's an extraordinary depiction of, first of all, it starts with all the chaos that she can create, or that she's associated with. And then the last few lines, I'd like to read it and get your comment on it, because it says so much. So the last 4 lines: who dares misery love, and hug the form of death, dance and destruction's dance, to him the mother comes.
Yeah, yeah.
That just seems to be an extraordinary welcoming of chaos and an embracing of it and finding the peace within it. Can you speak a little bit about it?
Perfect for this world. Every person, whether devotee or not, or highly intelligent or still ignorant, has to walk out of the house each day and embrace chaos in some form or another. It's even on the TVs, and it's everywhere. It's in your children as they come to greet you and scream, and it's on TV and in newspapers. So it's a perfect time for Mother Kali to come, the Kali Yuga, and she dances destruction's dance. The destruction of ignorance, destruction of egotism, destruction of distraction. She'll melt flesh and bone, bodies and egos right there, and just leave everything peaceful the way it is originally. When you decided to take a body, you came from this deep peace. At least we know some of us did. Everyone probably did, but it's not apparent to them yet. So that peace tends to stay with you all your life. It could be the reason why some people have faith from their very childhood, or can meditate deeply from their very childhood, and it's never a question. It's just a matter of finding your way through those early years of growing up in a society that has no knowledge of higher deities, that the kingdoms of heaven are within you. That's only a cryptic saying, not an actuality.
Mm. So
they have to work their way through that somehow. And if it's through religion with text-tortured scriptures, that aren't giving out the truth anymore, or being misinterpreted, then it even makes it harder. And you find this chaos in social circles with a friendly face, and then you find it in the military realms, with violence being committed on other races, even in defense or not. And you find it in upbringing, and you find it in the church, with its misinterpretation of great seers' sayings, the deterioration of religion over ages, as Krishna says in the Gita. So you have to face off with that, and she will help you do that. To him the mother comes, who will embrace it. It's rather yogic, because Father of Yoga, Lord Patanjali, wants you to take all your miseries and your sufferings and face off with them. The first step of that is not reacting to them, which would mean non-emotionalism. So Ashobha is no emotion, and it's one of these mental postures that you can put on. I won't react to anything anymore. On TV, in my life, I'll just, because I know from experience that in a week that'll be gone, and I'll be back to, square one again. I'll be back to normal consciousness. If I let myself get pulled out and emotional and upset, it doesn't do anyone any good anytime. In fact, it elongates the cycle of getting back to square one. So just practical and rational, it's yogic. You just become non-reactional to everything, from an insult someone gave you to 100,000 people dying in a tidal wave. You just do not react to it. You just look at it and say, life goes on.
Speaking of the tidal wave, I remember a few years ago when the earthquake in Japan happened. It was you talked about the TV footage you saw of the buses and homes being washed away. It was
Whole ocean liners getting dumped
it was
on
a
the
perfect example of how ephemeral everything is. And you go through this in the book in various aspects. That she's the dynamic power of everything happening, and also the Sakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena behind it, which I suppose would be good cause to have that peace in the midst of all activity.
Yeah, better than good cause, a necessity to have that. If you're born in the physical realm, in a body, then you're at risk right away from so many dangers. There are people who say, there's no danger, everything's all right, I'm all right, you're all right, and you're never all right in Maya. Even as it appears you might be for a while. You can spend a whole lifetime of all right and put off your karmas that caused you to be born in the body in the first place, and attached to objects and pleasures and conventional life, never seeing anything higher. But the next lifetime you'll find out that these have mounted up and they come up from as if from nowhere. Beautiful songs in India about that. You know, my mind has been painted white and fresh, but all of a sudden I see the black beetles of desires coming out from the woodwork. I don't know where they come from, Mother. How do I stop it, you know? So these hidden karmas will come out of the very woodwork of your mind and then catch up with you. So the solution for that is to do practice all the time, every day. Even if you don't think you're getting anywhere, you just do the practice that your teacher tells you. Of course, you're going to need a teacher first, and it's going to have to get instructions, and guess what? You're going to have to actually follow them. To the letter, if you can. Follow the tradition. It echoes in my mind all the time with Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj's pictures here are also. Follow the tradition, he would tell us. Because he'd see people wobbling and wavering, and you know, that's straw on fire. Vivekananda said, Americans are straw on fire. They get very enthused about new things at first, but it wears off too quickly. So, you know, that's where Mother will enter into the fray and wage war with your ego. And if you face off and, you know, face the brutes, as the classic story of Vivekananda facing this baboons that were running after him, and he turned and raised his staff and they dispersed. So you have to do that with every little thing and be strong, be fearless.
Yes. Well, I think the opposite side, you know, you mentioned about those little bugs in the mind, that they're always, you know, they just arise. Where do they come from? You also talk about in the book how her greatest boon is to give you love for love's sake, which is really, it's an extraordinary, you know, position to take, that love just exists,
Yeah.
you know, separate from anything that might be happening on the outside.
Again, that's the songs of India, the bhajans and stotrams. There's one that states that about she's fairly generous when she'll give the four fruits of life, and she'll even give moksha and liberation to those who really want it. But she's very loath to give pure love. It's like that's something you really need to earn. We know that if bhur bhuva swaha, if you're going beyond heaven, which is a teaching in our tradition, earth, lower heaven, higher heaven, you might call it, those souls are on a wheel with their ancestors, Buddha said. You know, so if you get to bhur bhuva swaha and you want to go on to janaha, tapaha, and deeper lokas that Krishna says in the Gita are subject to non-return, your soul will not come back in physical bodies anymore. You'll be in the kingdoms of heaven within, and you'll stay there. There are higher places to go even than that, because you still have a form. But the point here being is that if you reach that bhur bhuva swaha level, and that's a higher heaven, and you're still attracted to pleasures, and you still have karmas from that, and you're coming back to earth, that the only thing that can get you through that very tight and slender doorway from that third loka into the inner higher heavens is pure love for God. If you have that, you can enter. You can even be very knowledgeable and you know, fairly pure of heart and so forth. But there's these, it's like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you know, a needle, the thread won't pass through it if there's the tiniest little fiber. You're trying to get non-duality, you're trying to get pure love for God. Call it prema bhakti or brahmagyan, along the path of those two which eventually meet. Pure love for God and non-dual wisdom, you know, those meet and in the highest souls. So you're trying to get that through the eye of this needle, but your thread of your body-mind mechanism, you know, that isn't fully purified yet, has a little fiber sticking out of it you can't even see with your eyes. It won't go through and it bends. You know. So it's that exacting. Sharp as a razor's edge is the spiritual path, and difficult to navigate, so say the wise, the Upanishad says.
Yeah, you know, you had mentioned yesterday that she doesn't want 99% of your surrender. Which brings up a conundrum we've been talking about amongst the Sangha, about self-effort and grace. If you don't have the wherewithal to give 100% surrender, then that's where grace comes in. And you know, many of us have difficulty discerning when are we being too willful and when do we need to back off and have faith. And do you have any opinion about that?
We asked
Well, I'm sure
my
you do.
teacher about that, Swami Sheshananda, who had questions like that for him, and once he told us an answer to that question. He said, You know, Christians emphasize grace. Buddhists emphasize self-effort. But Sri Ramakrishna emphasized the joining of the two. You know, two wings of the bird. So one path, one yoga is maybe not enough for the people of the Kali Yuga. It might have been enough back in the Satya Yuga that you just, you know, in an age of truth where everyone knew that God existed and loved God and shared God, and instead of sharing Maya with each other. Hello, next door neighbor, you want to come over? I have some Maya to share with you. Sure, I'll bring some of my own. So it's just all confusion and lower knowledge at best. My mother used to say, oh, that was such an interesting man. And I was sitting there listening to the conversation. I was bored to tears with what he said. That was not an interesting man. I wasn't to meet an interesting man until I met him. Swami Sheshananda. So, well, it's not enough just to have one path. You're going to have to synthesize these yogas. You're going to have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps with what you're good at, and then not rest on your laurels. If you want enlightenment, if you want freedom, even if you want peace of mind, I think, in this age. And she's sort of epitomizing that. You drive toward one path and she might block it. So that's not enough. 100% self-surrender I need. You're pretty good at meditation, but you don't know how to serve people. You know. Or you know a lot about the scriptures, but you have no devotion. See? What's the matter with you? So get all four of these in you and work on them. That's sadhana. That's spiritual discipline. I look around the homes and neighborhoods and cities, states of the United States, I see that's the one thing missing, spiritual practice. Monks will do it, and the householders get distracted from it, but that's the cutting edge, and that's what gives you finer and finer births in higher and higher consciousness until finally you don't need to return to the body if you don't want to. Otherwise you're forced to. And you may not even know who forced you or what forced you. That it's your own hands that's holding the rope that drags thee on. As Vivekananda said. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. But you're praising and blaming God for it, or the devil. It's you yourself that's in charge of this process.
Yeah, I had what appeared to be like a terrible business setback about 3 weeks ago, and I just kept on repeating the Ram Prasad poem that was translated by Lex Hickson, our founder. I've offered my entire life at the fearless feet of the Divine Mother. Can death frighten me now? And it just felt like annihilation. And it transformed a week later and just was.
There you are.
Yeah. And
don't react to it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it brings me up to actually probably the most well-known depiction of her is the severed heads, and you examine that. Can you speak a little bit about that? The image of her. The severed heads around her waist and her neck.
Yes, right. Not just the severed head of the individual ego, or maybe the severed head of attachment to reincarnation, rebirth. That's a very subtle desire to be reborn. And that karma is at a very subtle level. But the necklace of skulls, waistband of arms, and things like that, yeah, those are all the powers that she has, and all the races, and like one beautiful song says, people think they do work and they call it their own, but the work really belongs to you. And Sri Ramakrishna used to like that song because he said, I don't do anything, Mother does it all. And you can say that and really not follow through on it. It can be kind of hypocritical, but in his case it was absolutely true. It was. He said, everything I know, everything I do belongs to the Mother. She sits in my throat and speaks this wisdom. I don't know anything about it. So he had given up entirely that ego that claimed anything for his own. It was a unique facet and feature about him. Absolutely sincere, without doubt, and the true exemplar in that case. So those songs evince a lot of that kind of knowledge that you'll need to have in order to attain ascendancy, inward ascension, you call it.
And it reminds me of the section of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna where he prays for Kali to show herself to him, and she doesn't, and then finally he threatens to impale himself on a sword, and as he's about to do that,
On her sword.
on her sword, she she appears. So it's that 100% surrender.
Yeah.
Um,
Which death can't even, can't resist you.
Can you recall what was some difficult things to surrender in your own life? That any particular impediments that were maybe the last few, or
It seemed to me when I looked back on it that all the impediments were in the culture. You know, the worst of them was in all of that. I didn't really think about a desire for dharmic parents till after I realized I didn't have them, you know, and look back on that, how life would have been so much better if I had have had teachings that weren't just moral and ethical, but teachings that were hers, and it could transform a mind and make it ready for spiritual life. As you know, households, again, no spiritual practice. They're not meditating together. They're not studying scripture together. You know, and doing worship at a home shrine. We have to go somewhere else, maybe, if they do that. And serving each other as God in human form, as God walking around on two legs. What God would you serve, Vivekananda used to say, if it's not God in human beings? Do you see any other God here? And of course, you're going to serve that same God in animals and plants. It's one of the 4 sacrifices of Hindu tradition, to sacrifice, you know, yagya, they call it, to these different levels of consciousness and different forms of life. All the way inward to the gods and goddesses, you're also doing offerings to them. If that were all known and put together, and you had a family guru or a teacher or a swami like that to tell you this, then you'd start to do it, and that probably wouldn't happen in the West till much later in your life. So that's what I'd say, when many things would have helped me a lot that were lacking in the culture, and you know, impediments like a government trying to send you to kill when you don't want to kill. You want to maintain nonviolence. Knowing that war is rising and peace is rising, and they're changing place all the time and always have been, and let's just be truthful, always will in this world. There'll never be an absence of war, and there'll never be an absence of peace. It'll just go on and on like it is until, you know, environment won't support us anymore, if that's when it happen, and then we'll fall away in another 15 million years, which is a blink of an eye. Nature will recreate us, as it were. And I hope we won't be born with the idea that we're monkeys, or that we evolved from some species, that we know that animals came out of us. We didn't come out of animals. The body may have had its development over the physical. You know, the 15 million march of the hominidae, but the soul is eternal and beyond bodies, and if we come back with that knowledge, then we got it from her, you know, and she's armed us with it to the teeth, like the pirate, you know, swinging from ship to ship, holding onto the rope. He's armed to the teeth because he had to put his sword in his mouth while he used 2 hands to get to the other ship. So she arms us with to the teeth, with going between these 2 ships of reality and relativity, you know, in our swing back and forth. If we have that dharma that's not just moral and ethics, then we will find our way. Milarepa says, you will find your way, don't worry. So the songs and the scriptures hold those keys, and they came from the seers, the rishis, who really had realized the truth. So we do that highest yagya actually to the seers. And I started doing that then. There were really no real things I had to give up, except, you know, I noticed it in others. I noticed that the Americans were very arrogant and obstinate, and they, even though they were spiritually immature, that they wouldn't listen about talk of God from a spiritually mature person. And so they were very arrogant in that way, knowing nothing but them, you know, saying that nobody can tell me what about God or what to do, you see. So I don't remember having any of that kind of problem. When I came to my teacher, I just surrendered to him. Oh, he's saying the truth. Okay, I'm yours. And there was just nothing in the way. That's what I was waiting for. That's what I was born for. There might have been other things that I'm not remembering right now. Let me think about that. And, you know, put out a book on it or something. But that's an autobiography. That's an ego. Actually, we don't like autobiographies. We like biographies. We like other people looking at great souls and writing about them. The great souls themselves don't write about themselves.
You know, in a sense, when you're a guru, you're wielding Kali's sword with your devotees and your students. How do you discern when to wield the knife and when to back off? How do you discern that auspicious timing? Is it just something intuitive, or do you contemplate, each person, or is it a spontaneous knowing? How does that work?
We'd have to ask Swami Sheshanand about that, because he was the master scolder. And myself, I can scold. Maybe I got the art of it from him a little bit, transmission of it, but I'm more merciful, more tender, more great, gentle. And when I do scold, it's like him coming into me and saying, this needs to be taken to task right now. And it just comes up spontaneously. I don't pre-think my scoldings. So, I don't like what that person did. I'm going back there and scold them. It's got to be right in the moment so the person gets the full brunt of the idea. And it's for their betterment. They know it's for their betterment, not because somebody has a vendetta against them.
Well,
we have a Vedanta against them, not a vendetta.
I remember one of the first scoldings I got from you. I think it was like a half an hour later I came back to you and was kind of defending myself, and you were trying to figure out what you had said. You totally forgot it.
Yeah.
And that's when I got the sense that there wasn't a personality behind,
Yeah, I'd prefer not to have to do that. But where the people are arrogant and egotistic and all that, you put up with it for only so long. But where it crosses the line with you, where they're trying to tell you something untrue that you know is actually untrue, and they're trying to present it to you as if you should accept it, that's where you have to say, sorry, no, this is not the case.
Yeah.
And I got the truth from higher authorities. You're still inquiring to your ego every day, and I'm inquiring to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in my meditations, or to Mother Kali when she's more swift, lightning swift. You keep her in mind, and then that is a kind of waging of war. She does.
Yeah.
It's not just waging a war on the level of chaos and confusion. You should already be beyond that. You shouldn't be participating in war and violence and things like that. You should have known better a long time ago and followed Jesus. Grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, you take unto yourself what is the Lord's. That's just a sensible person. Religion shouldn't get involved with politics and military. Shouldn't get involved with anything but God. Got to be kept pure and sacrosanct. So, in that regard, you would follow those rules carved in the granite of consciousness, those tried and true spiritual axioms.
Now, we could really spend hours on each one of these 24 aspects. They're so rich, and can mine them from wisdom. I'm particularly intrigued by the crescent moon on her brow. It's waxing and waning, and it speaks to the phases of time. And of course, Kali, represents time. The Kala is a Sanskrit for time. Can you speak a little bit about the time aspect and auspicious timing and the
Waxing and waning.
the aspects of that particular symbol?
Is it waning? Really?
It's waxing at the moment.
The crescent moon on her brow, can be a half moon, can be a full moon, can be no moon. Kalaratri, no moon. It's like the opposite of. It's just pure darkness, like her hair and her skin. It's just blackness, but it's the blackness, the radiant blackness of pure conscious awareness, as our founder Lex Hixon used to describe it. And even Ram Prasad in his own songs, devotees of Mother Kali like that, are aware of that radiant blackness. And the light shows up the best against that kind of backdrop. So a new moon is very precious too. Crescent moon, really the symbology is that she's beginning to reveal herself, and so it's a good time for adept practitioners to focus upon her half moon and full moon mean that anyone can come. You know, even non-adepts can come closer to her at that time. Sri Shardadev used to say, the Master has come this time for everyone. There's a time when only certain people could come to him, but now everyone, all kinds of people can come, because he's lifted the curtain of Maya for 200-300 years, you know, and like Atlas, you know, and beings can come through that gap in the curtain of Maya now, most readily, most easily in this age. She'll probably be at the door. Can you pass? Can you pass? Let's see. Is there a fiber sticking out of your thread still that won't let you pass? Or will Sri Ramakrishna be merciful and even forgive that? I mean, all things are possible in this day and age.
Yeah. In terms of the aspect of time, there was a retreat where you talked about how by studying the scripture, time starts to slow down and it starts to stretch and you become in the eternal moment. And I mentioned that to you, that I was experiencing that. You sort of said, yeah, you become the master of time. What does that mean to become the master of time, and how do we do it?
Well, you've probably taken recourse to meditation on Lord Shiva because he's, you know, Trikaladarshi, he's the seer Darshi of the three phases of time, which means past, present, and future. And when you become the seer of those three, then you realize there's an eternal moment that is engulfing in all of them, enveloping all of them. And then you can, since you know that, you start to use your time in such a way that like in meditation, cut time down. Sort of like maybe the Rip Van Winkle syndrome, you know, where you wake up and only, you know, you thought you only went to sleep overnight and all these months have passed. Where did I get these nails? And I think the efficacy of that for the spiritual practitioner is that they can actually make time slow down and speed up for them. You know, slowing down means that you can get so much done inside of an hour, so much more done inside of an hour if you're not frantic, if you're not imbalanced, if you're not hoping, if you're not fearing, if you're not attaching, if you're not conceiving even. Like people talk about writer's block. Well, I've never considered myself an author, but they're calling me an author because I wrote books. But I never had writer's blocks. I just said, that would be a good subject, sat down and wrote. I never experienced writer's block, ever, in all the dozens of books I've written, or dozen books I've written. So that doesn't exist for me because I didn't consider myself an author. I didn't consider myself putting together my own ideas and making it brilliant. I learned from my teachers and from the Dharma. And then that came through my mind that had been conditioned by spiritual practice. It hadn't been conditioned by the world, or by fame, or by money, or by notoriety, or about being rich in the future from books, or any of that wasn't there. I just have to be truthful about it. All it was being dedicated and having fealty to Mother Wisdom and wanting to share it with others. What else should be there? And that should be the way of karma yoga. Everyone should be doing works selflessly for the good of others. Talk about the thread that's hanging out, the fiber that's hanging off the thread, that your thread of your mind won't pass through the needle of God, like through the third eye. That would be one of the main ones for most people, is attachment to works and selfishly. For instance, I've had this experience. You can't talk to a businessman and tell him your perspective. He just does not understand that you should work without desire for money, fame, success, things like that. Or supporting his family even. None of those things are important. You work for the sake of others and let Mother take care of all that. And she will. Better if your ego is cut off, that you're not involved in that process. And also grief and remorse and shame and the other deadly traps of life will not affect you when calamities come, if you are that detached, you see. So it's extremely practical, but it's also rather mystical. Not a word we like to use, mystical, but there are mystical things about the process of spiritual life and evolution. Spiritual evolution, that's going on in the mind. Vivekananda used to say, there's no such thing as transformation and evolution, it's all a myth. But if there is any such thing as evolution, it's the evolution that happens to the thinking man rather than to the animalistic mind. that is something we can pay attention to. There seems to be a transformation going on in there that's a bettering of yourself lifetime to lifetime, spiritually speaking. So he says if there's any evolution, any parinama, any change, that would be the best type of it. Because we know Holy Mother said you need to, I was thinking of Sri Ram saying you need to graduate, get enlightenment by stages, but Holy Mother had teachings like that too, is that this mind is very important at this stage of life because you get to Brahman through it. People think they can just jump to Brahman, skip all these clutter that's in the mind, as if that's not going to pull them down if they even made the jump successfully. If not in this lifetime, in another, as we're saying, fibers. So.
I've written several articles for our newsletter, Mundamala, and examining the different swamis in the order, or the direct disciples. And one thing they all have in common is an extraordinary capacity for work. Maybe 2 hours of sleep a night, or they get an enormous amount of work done, and you get an enormous amount of work done, which speaks to a certain mastery of time and mastery of the mind. There are whole industries devoted to time organization, project management, and I'm curious how you manage your time. We can look at it in two ways. Of course, on the inner level, there's prana in the mind. On the outer level, there's certain habits. You have a number of projects going on at any one time, books being written, trips to India being planned, trips to the mainland being planned, and yet, you answer emails very quickly. You're always, every time I've tried to call you, you've picked up the phone. And one of the problems with getting work done seems to be interruptions. How do you handle, these kind of distractions and keep on track? I mean, do you have I'm sure there's an external technique as well as an internal technique for dealing with interruptions like that.
Mm-hmm. Any kind of gaps in consciousness are rather done away with by the person who masters the sixth limb of yoga, which is concentration. If you've reached the sixth limb of yoga and have concentration under your belt, then you might say that interruptions don't become interruptions anymore. They become a little break from your work that you welcome, So it's the state of mind you're in. You get all upset or something, or then it mars the flow of the Dharma, the mellifluous flow of these teachings that are coming from Mother Kali to you. And so if some interruption happens, and it's like you stay in that hello.
You don't lose momentum. Like you sort of keep...
I mean, you want to go out to the garden, do a little weeding, and take a break once in a while. It's time management, yes, but your mind's always in the Dharma. So you pull a weed and you say, gee, I wish I could pull the weeds of karma out of my students' minds like that. Whatever you're doing, it's like it's all in the Dharma. It's all in divinity, because that's where you live. That's where you've conditioned yourself to live, and you don't want to go back to where, in fact, you can't even remember what ignorance is like. People ask me, are you enlightened? And I say, well, my ignorance died at one point. If that's enlightenment, yes. If not, I still have, my dish is still in the oven, still being cooked, And of course there's always higher things to go. Our master, great master, we assigned that appellation to him after he passed. He didn't like the word master, or father, or guru. He said, those are names that prick my flesh, please don't use those, So, because he said, there's just, when they asked him about it, he said, because there's always higher and higher levels of spiritual realization and more spiritual experiences to have, please don't ruin that for me, by calling me master or guru or something. Just let me have this spiritual experiences all the time. And there's been no one in our history, and it could be said since the beginning of the Satya Yuga, I think, that epitomizes and explains samadhi to us like Sri Ramakrishna, the eighth and final limb. Both the seated samadhis and the unseated samadhi, and all the bhavas and moods that lead up to those. He's just a copious map of them. I've never seen a man like that. The sage has never seen a soul like that, one song sings. And of course we have to try and understand that. that he's trying to say, like be thee perfect as Father in heaven is perfect, you too can have samadhi. Well, how's that? Because it's your true nature. You've just fallen away from it. And, if you want to be kind, you can say people are having samadhi of objects now in this age. I've actually used that, had that thought and used that teaching. You're having samadhi of objects. But pretty soon you'll have samadhi of knowledge. And then you'll have samadhi of ripe ego. Then you'll have the samadhi of, hey, the ego's gone, this is even better. See, the head's been cut off. You're now mothers. So it's a beautiful thing, the Dharma and spiritual life and all the facets of it and the endless, infinite expansion of consciousness that if you want to take on a separate body-mind mechanism, you can have access to and be a liberated living soul, Jivan Mukta.
It was beautiful, lofty vision.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have goals, like maybe 2-year goals or 5-year goals, or do you just go by inner prompting and your goals may change? You obviously have books lined up, you have classes a year, planned a year, retreats planned a year ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
What's your balance between actively creating goals and being having room for serendipity as well?
Well, I like what Buddha said, gatam, gatam, paragatam. Go beyond all goals to the supreme goal. So you have no goals, actually. You just have that one goal of enlightenment in mind. And even that maybe becomes undesirable to hold. When you arrive at a place, then you just tend to expand out into it. A lot of people who had samadhi, sometimes they don't even know they're having samadhi. Like the samadhi of objects. If you're really getting keen, exquisite pleasure out of an object, and you're lost in it, and you don't really know this is a type of samadhi. It's really to you pleasure, or exquisite pleasure, but you just had a kind of samadhi through that. But there are higher samadhis to have. So back to goals. You make yourself a child of the mother, you try your best to do that, and if you succeed to any extent, then she speaks in your ear. Talk about hearing the voice of God, you hear the voice of Goddess. No man has seen God with these eyes, so I haven't heard God with these ears either. So it's the Goddess you're hearing. She's involved in the process. God is not. God is transcendent. Mm-hmm. That's for the highest samadhi. But if she is involved in the process and you have something you need to do, then you'll be going along your dharmic way, and all of a sudden the voice will appear and say, you have a retreat to teach next weekend.
So you get an inner alarm clock there.
Look at the scripture, read that. Oh, here's some teachings I can gather that. It's just all dharma, but somebody prompted you. Mm-hmm. Something prompted you.
Right.
Not of myself do I do. You really feel that way. And there has to be an ego there to be prompted. There's no doubt about that. To us, it's a matter of whether that's unripe or ripe.
Mm.
And if it's unripe, then the process can get confused and the transmission can be skewed. You're getting teachings from a teacher who is not very adept. And so you don't get the pure transmission that our founder Lexikson talked about, that he got from Swami Nikhilananda, and that I got from Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj and other swamis of the order. These are monks, so they concentrate on God and God only all the time, even when they do their work. So you don't understand that. There's a story, do we have time? There's a story, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, it was Latu, at Buddhananda. Swami Buddhananda there was an early office back in the early 1900s, and he was still alive. And somebody came in that office, and there was a Swami behind the desk, young Swami, buying a book or something, and this man saw this monk laying down behind the counter with this his chadar over his whole face. It was daytime, and the Swami behind the counter and this man talked to each other for a long time, and then all of a sudden the man said, "Oh, those Swamis, some of them are so lazy. I don't like monastics like that. They're so lazy. They're no good. They're no good for the, And so Swami turned behind the counter and said, "Hey, Latu, are you awake?" And Latu sat up and said, "Yes." "Were you sleeping?" "No, I don't sleep usually." And in fact, I heard your whole conversation for the last 20 minutes. I could tell you everything you said. You know, so they're awake while sleeping. They've got the insomnia of yoga. That's the phrase coined by like Sixen, our founder. The insomnia of yoga. It's hard to understand, but like you mentioned, the Swami who slept 2 hours and worked 22 constantly through the years. And the village people saw him do that, and the brahmacharis saw him do that. So they had this open nadis, you know, with the prana of mother flowing through them constantly, and that's desirable, that's blissful. You don't understand it. We're not doing that just to show someone how great we are, or to escape suffering or any of that. We just got attracted to her and never stopped, you see. We love her. She's our very self. She's our very energy. She's the power by which we enjoy things. You know, so.
Speaking of enjoying, when you're done with say you're done with a book, or you're done with a retreat, or you finished a project, and you haven't been a result seeker, you've just done your work. Do you savor the completion? How do you experience that next transition?
I pass it on.
The completion.
I pass it on. I don't tend to like my own works. I just like doing them. I'll go back and proof them, but I even have others to help me proof it.
So just on to the next thing.
Bless their souls, because basically, yeah, I mean, they're right. It is, some part of it is on to the next, and I've done that. I've been there, done that. I want to do this next thing that's in my mind, or she has in my mind. But you know, maybe years later, I've had experience where I've listened to a CD music, some spiritual music I put out, and I'll catch a strain of it. Someone else listened to it. Oh, I like that now. Didn't like it so much when I had to try and put it on tape, and you know, then mix it, and then perfect it and all that. It was just the work. That was karma yoga. But same with books. I've had books read to me where I said, "Who wrote that?" So that was you. You know, oh, I like that. You know, so. But in the maybe it's just the part of Lord Brahma, the creator part, you know, and the preserver part, and then the destroyer part is all working in that particular karma yoga. And you tend to dwell more in Lord Brahma. You'll just put this out, and then if you're not into the fruits of things, you don't want to know how many copies sold. It's actually depressing. And you don't want to know how much money it made. You know, that's beside the point. And you don't want. You just want to put it out there and hope people find it.
Well, Shiva is bringing this interview to completion. What happens now is up to
Who knows?
We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much again for this wonderful talk. And again, 24 Aspects of Mother Kali, available as a paperback and an ebook on Amazon.com. Nice. Full of wonderful wisdom. Thank you so much again, and hope to have another conversation soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anurag.